Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Dear Esther. Let me move my mouse cursor out of the way so it's not on the screen. As one thing I've noticed is that in the menu the mouse cursor would just stay in the same place. I guess it goes away when you're actually in the game with the controller anyways though, so it would be fine. Although if I was to try and use the mouse cursor as a controller, I'd also need a keyboard to walk. Like the right click and left click are just zooming in. Wow. There's a real herky-jerkiness. I think what you probably would want to do here is either procedurally have programmed your character to walk and kind of hover maybe just like a centimeter above the ground on a smoother plane of existence, or even not above the ground but slightly below the ground by about a centimeter on a smooth plane of existence, as far as path making, or perhaps procedurally program the way the camera works, so when you are going up and down it doesn't visually glitch as much as it seems like this game tends to do every now and then. So I think we're in chapter 2 of Dear Esther, and it might be a case that there's some procedural day-night cycles happening here, or weather patterns, but I'm not sure. I kind of suspect that this whole island might just shift and change. Like, at a certain level, I wouldn't be surprised if boats turned into cars, if paths turned into roads, if rocks turned into buildings, and we were just in a completely different location. That would require asset flipping for different collections of assets instead of just sticking with rocks, and that would push the computer or console hardware more, in that you would have to have more shaders compiled if you are using shaders. I doubt this game actually is, or more textures just loaded up in video RAM. Definitely seems like there's blinking lights that you can chase after. So my current theory, 45 minutes into the game so far, is that we are going to learn the backstory of Esther being dead, possibly being pregnant, being hit as a pedestrian or as a driver in a car accident and dying there. Peter could be the name of her lover, or the name of the driver who hit her and killed her. Connolly, or Donnelly, who has been mentioned a couple times, feels like he might very well be a red herring character, or he is a person that only relates to a completely side story as far as this island. As far as the side story on this island, it seems like there's possibly a chemical, drug, or disease that's on this island that Connolly or Donnelly, I've already forgotten the name, was investigating.
I've begun to wonder if Donnelly's voyage here was as prosaic as it was presented. How disappointed not to have found the bones of the holy man. No wonder he hated the inhabitants so. To him they must have seemed like barnacles mindlessly clinging to a mercy seat. Why cling so hard to the rock? Because it is the only thing that stops us from sliding into the ocean, into oblivion.
So, yeah. Here you can see there's this weird vibration happening as I run against this 2D barbed wire texture and go up and down the path. Now, game engines now really do allow you to potentially have the rocks or the dirt on the ground both visually depict itself and have a physical interaction element to it. So if you see a rock, you can stand on the rock, whereas older games tended to have rocks just be hollow and you would just walk through them, or you would have to manually program a circle or a square as far as a hitbox around a rock. And I think this game in particular suffers from the fact that it was by default fairly easy to have the interaction box, the hitbox of an object, be exactly the same as the visual aspect of the object, because the hitbox probably should be a lot smoother. And we still can't jump, so in your standard video game you'd assume you're supposed to platform on this, jump around, find some kind of object or some kind of key. Find some kind of secret at all. At a certain level, you almost wonder if the idea was that new programmers should make walking simulators as a way of learning how to just place 3D objects and develop a game. But I don't think I really can agree with that. Like, sure, it's a lot like Game Jam games where I don't really agree with those ideas either. Making a game. I still can't read what this says. It seems like all neither did he eat nor drink.
There must be a hole in the bottom of the boat. How else could new hermits have arrived?
I'm still not getting that first word. Interesting. This looks like a transformer circuitry symbol, but it could just be some other design. Oh. So stand here, look here, look there. Doesn't seem like you can interact with anything. Just being somewhere and seeing something seems to be all you can do. But yeah, Sadly, this feels like a kind of game that's not going to keep count for you. You're not collecting keys or checkpoints or even achievements for doing everything, so because of that, you're not. That's interesting. You're not really going to know where to go or what you missed. Overall, if you're going to have a landmass this big, I really would prefer to have maps. Feels like we may just find more and more garbage strewn about. Weirdly, I guess this game probably compares fairly well to a game like The Witness, because every single like visual angle and everything you can see in The Witness is handcrafted painfully to be the way it is and have you see things the way it is, where this game so far seems like it's just items are strewn fairly willy-nilly with no real care. Yeah. You'd think maybe that would trigger something. We can hear a bell, a buoy bell. Video games have actually done a pretty poor job as far as finding a way to communicate to a player that they need to listen to an audio sound for a certain amount of time or zoom in visually on an audio. There are definitely some games where you have like Morse code or secrets in the audio files. But yeah, if it was something as crazy as you needed to listen to the bell ring 12 times and then it would magically teleport you to a whole different world, you would need some kind of visual feedback. The for audio things, you just really don't know how deaf a player might be. So if they're completely deaf and can't hear anything, that's a problem. If they just aren't paying attention audio wise and have the volume all the way off or turned way down, that can be a problem. I suppose we really are in a situation where until you hear that next line of dialogue pop up, you don't know if you're going in the right direction. I'm fairly certain I have already walked this path and may have to try and jump down. Yeah, no fall damage or anything like that. We have slightly different sound effects whether you're walking on sand or rocks. That too is pretty much just procedurally generated, though, in an engine like Unity and Unreal. And notably for games that have made engines that work that way, what you end up with is a lot of textures that either have no sound effect when you walk on them at all, and then you have one
I had
annoying
kidney stones, and you visited
metal
me in the hospital.
sound effect when standing
After the
on a metal
operation, when I was still half
platform.
submerged in anesthetic. Your outline and your speech both blurred. Now my stones have grown into an island and made their escape, and you have been rendered opaque by the car of a drunk.
Alright, so the game has straight up told us that Esther was killed by a drunk driver. The only thing I would say is that there's a small possibility that the drunk driver is the character we're playing as, and Peter is the husband of Esther. And I wouldn't be surprised, since this game visually is all about split paths, if there's a pretty obvious choice at the end of the game to determine whether or not you are the drunk driver or the husband. And I say husband just on an assumption, like they could obviously not be married. Although, suppose there's a possibility that you are the husband and you're the drunk driver, and Peter is someone else, a brother or a lover. It's not super common, I think, in the UK to openly have a...
Is this what Paul saw through his windscreen? Not Lot's wife looking over her shoulder, but a scar in the hillside, falling away to black forever.
Now, we have Paul. This is a more artistic section. Let's just see what happens if we jump down there.
Come back.
And so I got a achievement for diving off a cliff once. So noticeably all the achievements here are around your character dying, killing himself. Which maybe that is the end of this whole narrative in this story. Yeah. So it does seem like there's either a Peter and a Paul, or just a Paul, and I've gotten the name wrong. There's a Donnelly, not a Connolly. I got that name wrong.
I've begun my ascent on the green slope of the western side. I've looked deep into the mountain from the shaft, and understood that I must go up and then find the way under. I will stash the last vestiges of my civilization in the stone walls and work deeper from there. I'm drawn by the aerial and the cliff edge. There is some form of rebirth waiting for me there.
Now noticeably I'm pushing the analog stick fairly slowly to have a nice little cinematic walk, when I could be walking about twice as fast. Now, for a thumbnail, this game just shows this building on the top of the hill. So, unless this building on top of the hill is just our defined goal through each chapter, we're probably not going to see anything more visually impressive than the building on top of the hill. Just as possibly the house, the home of Esther. And it's very possibly a house that shouldn't be on this island. there's not a lot to say about the TV series Lost. But the mystery box concept that Lost tried to play with, and that intrigued a lot of people in its early seasons, probably inspired some of this too. Although inherently, if you are just making a video game, surrounding everything by water is a pretty default way to do things, and it visually makes a lot of sense.
The bothy was constructed originally in the early 1700s. By then, shepherding had formalized into a career. The first habitual shepherd was a man called Jakobsen, from a lineage of migratory Scandinavians. He was not considered a man of breeding by the mainlanders. He came here every summer whilst building the bothy, hoping eventually that becoming a man of property would secure him a wife and a lineage. Donnelly records that it did not work. He caught some disease from his malcontented goats and died 2 years after completing it. There was no one to carve white lines into the cliff for him either.
So it just kind of seems like your character basically has free reign or free ownership of this entire island. I've never heard of a bothy. I assume this is a style of building.
Three cormorants seen at dusk. They did not land. This house built of stone, built by a long-dead shepherd. Contents: my camp bed, a stove, a table, chairs, my clothes, my books. The caves that score out the belly of this island, leaving it famished. My limbs and belly famished. This skin, these organs, this failing eyesight. When the battery runs out in my torch, I will descend into the caves and follow only the phosphorescence home.
So yeah, he's British. He's using the phrase torch as flashlight. Yep, that seems like a fairly modern sleeping bag. Interesting, we had a bit of life there, and that a bird flew away. And certainly you could try and make these kinds of games feel more life-filled with animals flying around. We're constantly being told that we're going to the caves, and it looks to me like there might be something there. It's possible the character we're playing as is a ghost, just haunting, like literally haunting the cliff sides. Didn't we already come in here and check this out? No, I think this is actually a different... I'm 100% sure that these are the same images. This isn't. This has triangles and diodes, some symbols. At least that's what I would call a triangle with a line on it, is a electric symbol with a diode. Whereas we were seeing chemical symbols before. Very possibly that is the randomization that you have in this game, is that if you look at one thing, it might determine what you see next. So me staring at one symbol may have gone towards more electrical designs, where had I stared more, let's say, this flower symbol, which I assume that's what this is, I'd see more flowers or more chemicals. I'd say there's a real problem storytelling wise though that we've run into, is that probably about halfway through the second chapter of 4 chapters, and there's not really an established goal, not really even a big twist or anything particularly interesting that's happened. This is where in a story you might have a flashback in between the first chapter and the second chapter, or a change of scenery, or at least a change of theme and pace. At the very least, I could see having the weather change, or a day-night cycle change. See, this is weird because you have this buoy here, and then you have a house, a lighthouse.
Jakobsen's ribcage, they told Donnelly, was deformed, the result of some birth defect or perhaps a traumatic injury as a child. Brittle and overblown it was, and desperately light. Perhaps it was this that finally did for him, unable to contain the shattering of his heart. In half-light, his skeleton a discarded prop, a false and calcified seabird.
There's a lot of characters being introduced. It would be nice to potentially have a journal that would let you pull up just every line of dialogue you've had. It would be nice if you could, in that journal, have descriptions or names of people, if you're going to have that many people involved. Weirdly, I kind of want to make a comparison from this game to another independent game that was made by one person, which was, no, it's not called The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, that's a movie.
They found Jakobsen in early spring. The thaw had only just come. Even though he'd been dead nearly 7 months, his body had been frozen right down to the nerves and had not even begun to decompose.
Probably should be seeing the
Struggled halfway down
skeleton.
the cliff path, perhaps looking for some lost goat, or perhaps in a delirium, and expired, curled into a claw right under the winter moon. Even the animals shunned his corpse. The mainlanders thought to bring it home unlucky. Donnelly claims they dragged it to the caves to thaw out and rot, but he is proving an unreliable witness.
See, all these natives that they talk about just seem to completely be missing. I'm not seeing corpses either. The Return of the Obra Dinn is the name of the game, made by a different developer, a maker of Papers, Please before that. In that game, you have a much smaller location in that you really are just on a large sailing ship compared to this island, but you have a lot more writing, a lot more dialogue, and a lot more gameplay, because there's this mystery puzzle game of identifying all the people that were on Obra Dinn and identifying how they died in the narrative. And at no point would I be able to make the argument that Obra Dinn is a walking simulator, which it has very quickly became an insult. And nowadays I don't inherently want to insult a game just by calling it a walking simulator, but I certainly could insult a game, whether it's a walking simulator or not, by saying it's lacking a feeling of effort in its development, or lacking interactivity, or lacking a good gameplay mechanic, which those are all. See, here this feels like this is a power pole, not as much a sailing pole, but as we walked near it, I felt like I was hearing a sound effect. Feels like when you walk near certain things the first time, you might get a random sound effect, although you may just be getting random sound effects overall. Almost certainly, if I was going to compare Dear Esther to Oberdin as a small niche puzzle game will last longer as far as being relevant and being worth something that you should play, being something that you should play, where this game has such a small amount to it that it feels fairly skippable as an experience, particularly if somebody had spoiled it for you.
Climbing down to the caves, I slipped
just
and fell
told
and
you the
injured
overall
my leg.
story.
I think the femur is broken. It is clearly infected. The skin has turned a bright, tight pink, and the pain is crashing in on waves, winter tides against my shoreline, drowning out the ache of my stones. I struggled back to the bothy to rest, but it has become clear that there is only one way this is likely to end. The medical supplies I looted from the trawler have suddenly found their purpose. They will keep me lucid for my final ascent.
So it seems like the character we're playing as is claiming to be near death. So we can either go in the cave, or we can try and follow the path this way. Now, if this guy was hurt, it might be interesting in any experience that you're walking through to have the character drop a path of blood. I could see that being an interesting reveal if halfway through the game you turn around for the first time and realize that there's just this trail of blood that has been following you this whole time. See something shining, but that may just be a visual glitch. That's kind of the problem with video games though overall, is that there could be something flickering and shining and it would be fairly natural and normal. A lot of garbage on the walls here. Books. Just books and books and books. And a suitcase. So maybe there's a specific book you're supposed to look at or see. Maybe not. Yeah, it does feel like there's just a lot of Easter egg dead ends in this game. Yeah, I don't know if a blood trail helps you that much, other than it would show you where you've already been, and if it was a game, it was kind of a hidden object 3D game where you needed to go everywhere and look everywhere for items, or just to be in a place to see something to trigger a conversation, that might be helpful. I would think it might even be useful to have like a black light added to your flashlight and a button where you could turn the flashlight on and off at your own determination if you were going to have a gimmick of a character leaving a trail. I'm not sure that even modern games though would be able to easily create a trail of like dripping blood to show where you've been, effectively just a breadcrumb trail showing you where you've been instead of a breadcrumb trail showing you where you're supposed to go. What you would have to do is pre-render effectively a path in the middle of every place you can walk and have just a pre-rendered narrow line that would light up with a black light and look like drops of blood, instead of allowing the game to actually drop a drop of blood on the ground everywhere you walked, because saving that would take up so much RAM and so much hard drive space as you potentially walked back and forth just painting the ground, that it just wouldn't be efficient. You could probably pull it off though, like if it wasn't blood, if it was a game where you just could paint the trail and you could probably save that. It would just take up a lot of space. It would be very much like the Skyrim save files, where the more cheeses you move from their original location, even if you just knock a piece of cheese or any other object slightly off of the shelf, that new location gets saved, and the save files get bigger and bigger because of that, and just bloat. Of course, what I'm talking about right now has really nothing to do with Dear Esther, which I think really just is highlighting that I am not that interested in Dear Esther, and these episodes are getting shorter, not longer.
From here, this last time, I have understood there is no turning back. The torch is failing along
I actually
with my resolve.
can't move the
I hear
cursor
the singing
in
of the sea
camera right
creatures
now.
from the passages above me, and they are promising the return of the gulls.
So we do have slightly different visuals now with the stalactites and stalagmites and being in a cave. Slightly different sand to walk on. And there's our flashlight, so we probably are just done with flashlights altogether. And why would there be a lit candle is very questionable. That's perhaps scarier than it seems, and that implies there's somebody else here, although somebody lighting a candle really shouldn't be that scary. So, what have we really learned in this second chapter as far as the story goes? Not too much. They seemingly locked in that Esther died in a car wreck. I think it's still possible that the character you're playing as was the husband and the drunk and killed her, or was just the drunk driver and killed her. Either seems possible. Also, as a third option, he may be the husband and then the other character killed her. Paul, I think, is his name, unless it was Peter. It would be, I guess, kind of funny if they're actually changing the name between Peter and Paul, and just to confuse you if you're paying a lot of attention. But yeah, that would be weird. Donnelly and the goat herder Johnson still feel like they are red herring characters that don't seem to have any real connection to what's happening to Esther. And I'm not sure that they aren't just 100% made up characters, in the same way I'm not 100% sure that this isn't a 100% made up island happening in the mind of the protagonist. But yeah, we didn't really learn too much. There's still some speculation that she might have been pregnant just because of that one sound effect. In the 40 minutes we've walked around, we've heard some more sound effects, but they seem to be fairly random. We've seen some random markings that seem to not really mean anything. I really doubt that there is any big reveal to happen here. Or it may be a case that there actually is some secret big reveal, but you would only find that big reveal if you played through the game extremely thoroughly and just found every single line of dialogue and figured out how to interpret all of it. And that's not particularly fun. And in comparison to the Return of Obra Dinn, that one of the things that I really like about Obra Dinn is that for the most part you will play the game all the way through and you will get the big reveal at the end. There's no Easter eggs or secrets there. The game's goal is to find out what happened to the Obra Dinn, and you do find out what happened to the Obra Dinn, and it's satisfying enough. Anyways, I said at the end of the last episode that I'm afraid I'm going to run out of criticism to have for this game, and I definitely still have that fear, so let's end this episode here. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to support me further, there's some links down below. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.